Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks. Apologies for a couple of minutes late. My name's Paul Jones. I'm the General Manager from Accelerated Source to Pay, and I'm going to step everybody through and orchestrate everybody through the webinar over the next hour. Just before we get started, just a couple of logistical components. So we've got a chat and questions section. We're going to be fielding those questions at the end of the session. So please, if anyone has a question as we go through the presentation, please feel free to use that functionality, and we'll pick those up at the end. Okay, look. So thank you to everybody for joining us today. We're really excited about what is the start of a series of webinars that we're going to run. What I would say, look, we're going to talk about deploying SAP Ariba P2P solution in a 12-week period of time, focusing on a very agile, faster, lower cost way of doing a sort of cloud SaaS implementation. We'll talk about out-of-the-box pre-configured solutions based around best practice. We have pitched this particular webinar very much at mid-market size organizations. So those organizations with 1.3 billion pounds sterling turnover. What I would say, and we do recognize there are a number of large enterprise clients on the webinar today, which is great, and we're really happy to have you with us. And actually, in some respects, a lot of the themes and principles we've used to build out this mid-market solution are absolutely things that we apply in our day-to-day work with a lot of our large enterprise clients. So on the back of the webinar, for any of those large enterprise clients that want to talk through this approach specifically to how that would work in a large enterprise environment, we'd be more than happy to do that. So very quickly, just walking you through the agenda, I'll introduce the team that I have with me today, and they'll introduce themselves as they step through the session. Then what we're really going to talk about is, look, what's the burning platform for a buying and an invoice solution? What's the outside-in view, particularly the CFO's view, I guess. We'll talk a little bit then around what you get out of the box and pre-configured, what's in scope, but in some respects, actually, what's not in scope, because that's just equally as important. We'll then provide you with a solution overview and show you some of the ease of use and key features and functionality of the SAP Ariba P2P solution. And then we'll get into the sort of the how do you go about deploying in such a short space of time? What are some of the prerequisites? What are some of the key enablers during that period of time? And then at the very end, we'll provide you in a day in the life of you as a customer, in week 13, in month 1, in month 3, what's the value realization and the business outcomes that we achieve as a result of this. And then, as I explained earlier, we'll take the questions from the chat and the questions section, and we'll talk to you guys about next steps. We're really passionate about this, not just being a one-off webinar, but an actual webinar and a theme that we continue throughout the course of the year. So very, very quickly, I guess company introductions. There's 3 real components to this out-of-the-box solution and out-of-the-box implementation. On the one hand, we've got SAP itself and its sort of wealth and experience over the years around source to pay and specifically around procure to pay. We've got SAP Ariba, global market leader in a fully integrated source to pay platform, which we're now making very much readily available for some of our general business, mid-market size organizations. And then you've got our organization around accelerated source to pay, where we're a niche provider that have a strength and depth of expertise in source to pay, both from a business process perspective, but also functionally and technically when it comes to configuring and designing the solution and integrating it with the back end. I guess the key thing about the intro here is what we've done is we've taken all of that expertise and experience from these 3 organizations, and we have we've pooled that together to build not just an out-in-the-box pre-configured solution, but also an out-of-the-box implementation, above and beyond the traditional, classical sort of waterfall implementation in that respect. So with you today, I introduced myself earlier as Paul Jones. We also have Jason Wolf from the global SAP Ariba team. Jason, can I just give you a quick opportunity here from an SAP Ariba perspective, just to set the scene and talk the guys through how important a strategic initiative this is for SAP Ariba?
Outstanding. Happy to, Paul. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that's great.
Excellent. Well, first off, thank you for the opportunity. I'm delighted to participate in today's event. This is an area of specific interest and focus for the team at SAP Ariba. So for my background, I've been with the Ariba side of the house for a little over 14 years. I've had an opportunity to work all over the planet, running the business in Europe, South Africa, Latin America, and certainly North America as well, now in a global capacity. I can tell you from a top level and go-to-market function, this is one of our most important pillars for long-term success. When we look at this particular space, it's all about our approach. It's about defining realistic and achievable objectives. It's about a fully digital and visible experience. And it's about the long term that you mentioned, right? Not just what's the implementation going to be like, how can I do this in an agile way, but how do I get there fast, and how do I maintain a successful long-term implementation? So if we look at approach, this is built from the ground up. This is agile. This is using the legacy experience of 20 years plus, but it's then built into the tool for a full horizontally integrated and vertically integrated approach, so that you can manage the source to settle process directly in the tool. I would say that from a results perspective, it's about gaining control to the commitment processes. It's about understanding specifically where things are happening and where they're not. And it's about obtaining the opportunity to drive better cash management practices. These things are going to be unlocked through a willing and capable partner. And I think Accelerated is a partner that can absolutely deliver on that message. So I'm thrilled to be here, and thanks, Paul.
Great, thank you, Jason. That's really appreciated. And then look, finally, just wrapping up the team with us today, I've got Erica on the line, who'll sort of walk you through how the solution looks, the look and feel, the end-to-end process in the solution. I've also got Naveed, who's going to be collecting all of your questions and answers as we go through the session, getting ready for the Q&A session. So look, we looked at this from a CFO lens. We recognise specifically in the mid-market that typically, procurement, finance, source to pay, very much, traditionally comes underneath the banner of the CFO. Like, equally in large enterprises, as we all know, the CFO is one of many C-suite stakeholders that has a keen interest in procurement as an organisation. And from a recent sort of survey we looked at this year, we felt that it was really striking that the top 3 priorities from a CFO perspective in terms of procurement really played to what we're going to talk about today. There's an emphasis on process efficiency and automation. How does a procurement and a finance function deliver more for less? There's a constant demand on value, savings delivered, but increasingly more collaboration, more ease of doing business with the suppliers, and the supplier experience is equally as important as the user experience. And then finally, and P2P or source to settle is a great example of that. How can they strengthen the way of working between procurement and finance? We all know from an accounts payable automation perspective, you never drive a level of digitization in that part of the process unless actually upstream we've got well-defined buying channels, we've got flexible ways of buying. We're using catalogs and forms to do that. So we felt that as an outside-in perspective, the CFO priorities really play to this solution. Then when we look at mid-market, mid-market organizations specifically, and from some of the clients we work very closely with in that space, then some of the common pain points, we just talk about a couple here, but procurement compliance. We often find organizations where all of the spend in the mid-market is all based on non-backed, non-PO backed invoices. So actually in some respects the ease of use is really easy because people can pick up the phone and they can order what they like. Therefore replacing that, you have to have a front-end guided by-end user experience that's intuitive, easy to use, easy to find what they want. And then we want, procurement organizations, finance organizations, they want to get preferred pricing. They want to channel as much spend through preferred suppliers and preferred contracts. So the procurement compliance agenda is really important, but you drive that through adoption, not through policy. Then we look at it from a control angle. Again, in the mid-market, you've got organizations growing for acquisition, historically have grown significantly over a period of time, but yet the control and internal audit aspect of it is still very paper-based. We see wet signature approvals, we see a lack of budget checking and understanding what commitments and liabilities are, and the use of some of the modern day ways of buying goods and services internally are just not being used. And then you look at it from an order management transaction perspective, things are still being sent by fax or on paper, at best maybe by email, but from the supplier side, there isn't that sort of level of supplier self-service and the information that the supplier gets, even if it's just something as simple as when am I going to get paid. In this mid-market area, payment and confidence of payment is great from a cash flow perspective. And then we look at accounts payable from a pay, paper, high levels of exception matchings, constant retrospective approvals, high volume of non-PO invoices, just leads to a relatively inefficient way of managing a finance, say, accounts payable organization. And then we look at payables, negotiated versus actual. It's great putting a good contract in place, but was what you actually invoiced, how does that map then against the pricing in the contract? Likewise, how can we use things like early payment discounts to improve the cash flow of our supply base, especially in the SME area? And then I guess at the end, you've got the sort of management and control. We often see procurement and finance functions in the mid-market with low levels of maturity. That's not a criticism. It's just a natural evolution of how those businesses have grown and evolved over time. They have a lack of visibility of spend, particularly even so on some of the indirect spend categories, and therefore a lack of real transparency in that respect. So what we've pulled together, I believe, is not only an out-of-the-box pre-configured best practice solution that drives speed to value, it also addresses all and more of these particular pain points for the mid-market organizations. And then if we get into the solution itself, and we'll show you it in a minute, but what's really important is when you look at a P2P process, and I've worked in this space for over 20 years, it staggers me when I think a requisition that needs to be approved, that then creates a purchase order, ideally that's backed against a contract or a preferred supplier. That purchase order then needs to be transacted to the supplier who can create an invoice, internally a goods receipt or a service receipt if required, and then mapping that data back into the financial ledger. At a very high level, that feels like it should be a relatively straightforward business process. But we've been part of implementations and we've worked with clients where just getting that process right takes an inordinate amount of time. And I think what we want to do is to just do something about that. And I guess the solution that we've jointly developed with our SAP Ariba partner is very much very much around sort of taking some of that complexity away from the customer. You know, we've done over 100 implementations. We know P2P inside out. So coming up with a solution with which is standard pre-configured functionality that enables that process I just described to work well, was something we've done only recently, and actually in some respects I think, well, why didn't we actually do it a number of years ago? So to walk you through the functionality and what's included, we've also given you an idea here around what's not included. Often we start an implementation and there's sometimes a misalignment between what the solution can do and what's included in the scope and what isn't. So here you've got a set of standard and pre-configured functionality. The most important thing here is you don't wait 12 weeks after a build phase to see this. Actually, the minute you buy the software and we start mobilizing the project 2 weeks before we start it, this actual end-to-end process and functionality is already in the system. I think that's important for people to understand that. We've got guided buying and catalog functionality. So for repeatable, high volume spends, we can, from day one, we can channel that spend through a great user experience and pre-configured catalogs. More importantly, we've pre-configured some of those buying channels and the content to support it. We can use a spot buy functionality, which for those of you that haven't heard that term in the context of SAP Ariba, is effectively a marketplace that you have access to in the same way as a consumer you have access to things like eBay, for example, and Amazon. We can handle also non-catalog purchases. We know non-catalog will not be available on day one. Free bids and a buy is really important because a lot of mid-market organizations, as well as getting the transactional efficiency and the spend compliance, you also want to get quick sourcing results. Sometimes you get requirements that come into customers as requisitions. You want to be able to flip that into a very sort of rapid tactical source event. We can deliver significant savings during the first month of the project just to do that alone. Then we get some of the more sort of financial transactions around receiving rules, invoice exceptions and tolerances, being able to invoice against contracts, before we then get to the integration question. So again, another key point here around this pre-configured solution is we're working on the assumption that we've got a light integration scenario. That's master data coming in, and it's an okay to pay file effectively going out to the back end ERP. Now, unlike with a lot of other SaaS vendors, it typically stops there with light integration. However, with this solution, we've also built an accruals engine. Typically, the biggest objection to a light integration scenario typically comes from finance, where they suddenly have to go out of their back-end ERP and into the SaaS application to manage some of their accruals and commitments. What we've built here as an add-on is an accrual engine that does that for you as part of the interface. Best practice category taxonomies, so that on day one, when transactions are flowing through the system, you've got spend analytics already built into the P2P report because you've got the transaction volume going through it. RFP templates if sourcing is included, languages, currencies, standard approved, pre-configured finance and procurement approval chains. How often have we been in projects where the delegated authority becomes the critical path to the blueprint phase? What we're trying to do here is come up with a pre-configured set of approvals that takes your approval master data and then aligns that to a standard approval, and then standard roles in the system. So the key thing here is this is all available in week -2. It allows us to raise awareness, do process walkthroughs, train the team right at the beginning of the project in the first week. More importantly, it allows us to build the function, the out-of-the-box functional specs and start thinking about the integration on day one of the project rather than week 12.
Hey, Paul, this is Jason. Let me just add to that, to the power of that point, if you're okay. So, what you're talking about there is instead of spending weeks doing design sessions and PowerPoints and Visio flows, the approach is we take the forms that are most commonly used. We take the approvals that are used across thousands of customers, and you get to see them live and in the tool. So it's a very much a live manifestation of the way the tool will work for your organization. And it's from that point that we evolve and configure on the fly to make those changes. So it's not a how could we do it, how should we do it, what's the whiteboard look like. It's a physical representation of the results that are coming to you as the customer, right? And it's whether it's on a PC, a tablet, or even your phone for approvals, we want you to have that physical reality and clarity starting from week 0.
No, absolutely. And Jason, you know, I've always looked at this solution as a mindset change for a lot of people, you know, customers included. It's a mindset change around how you approach the deployment and implementation. It's a mindset change for us as implementation partners and software sales around how we actually, you know, can provide the customer with much more clarity around what the solution is going to look like on day one, which is great. And then look, I put in here a couple of additional functionality areas. So what we're not saying here is, you know, we built a pre-configured solution which is effectively a reduced scope, let's say, for the mid-market. Absolutely not. We're taking the feedback from customers that say, look, sometimes you don't have to deliver everything on day one. I've seen so many projects where they get caught up in a particular design challenge or a particular integration challenge, and it derails the whole timeline of the go live. So what we try to do here is take the best practice out of the box functionality that we think is, you know, as a minimum will deliver value, user experience at speed, but at the same time create an ecosystem and a continuous improvement cycle that allows us to take some of these additional features and optimize and improve those over time. So you're not waiting for some of those additional functionality. And we've listed a couple of these here, you know, tax processing, total landed costs, you know, some of the things that have tax components, queue management. Yeah, now some of these things can come in and out, and I guess that's part of the scoping conversation as well. Okay, so so look, I'm gonna quickly hand over to Erica. Erica is one of our solution architects. She's gonna, before we get into that, the sort of how do we actually deploy this, Erica is just gonna talk a little bit around how is this done in this solution and bring the actual solution to life for you guys. Erica, I'm handing it over to you.
Thanks, Paul. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Great. Yeah, so the tool that we're delivering, you know, we have, you know, we'll have a ton of content pre-configured, ready to go, but what does that mean for you? And still, it's the ability to provide that Amazon-like shopping experience, approve, whether you're working in the office or working from a mobile application, giving you access into tons of suppliers. So the Ariba network, we've talked about the size and scale of how large the Ariba network is. So how do you kind of tap into that from a marketplace perspective? And then as much as possible, eliminating paper from the process. So the ability to reconcile out your invoices electronically, convert more paper invoices into electronic. That's really the aim of what we're trying to achieve. So let's give you guys a little bit of insight into how this is done and what the solution really looks like. So what you're looking at here is our guided buying user interface. Guided buying really just intended to deliver that easy, quick, and simple interface to doing your shopping. So you have kind of category style breakdowns of the different items in which you can buy. We also have, you know, features like predictive text searching and fuzzy word searching to help you find all of the items that you're looking to purchase. We mentioned a lot of the content being pre-configured from day one. So here's just a couple of examples of some categories with pre-configured content. So office supplies is a great example. We have all of your office supplies pricing. We also have the ability to designate preferred suppliers. But we're not just limited to materials, there's also services as well. So you can see below there's some postal shipping services too that can be included within your category breakdown. Just moving forward then, other categories where we may see pre-configured content. There we go, sorry. Advertising, marketing. So these are great areas of spend where they are very service-based. I'll show you in a moment what a form looks like so you can see how you can kind of build some of the procurement around services. But again, this is all going to be pre-configured content that we have included almost right out of the box for you. Legal services is another great opportunity. We've got facility services and different facilities categories. Travel, so if you have travel systems, for instance, Concur, we can integrate different systems into this buying experience so you're able to buy not only content but also integrate into your travel and expense systems. IT technical tends to be a very, very large category. And these are those forms. So it's pre-configured forms for you to be able to buy from. These forms can actually provide the content for a requisition itself or kick off what Paul had mentioned earlier, the 3 bids and a buy style process. So in this example, the request for consulting services, this is actually going to give way to an RFQ or what we would call 3 bids and a buy for these consulting services. Last but not least, we mentioned the ability to tap into the Ariba network. This is what if you hear the term spot buy, this is what it's related to. So spot buy from day one is integrated into your guided buying solution. What this is going to do is get you access into a marketplace of suppliers. So while certain catalog content you may have already enabled within your environment, this is the ability to tap into all other sources of supply for marketplace pricing, really to help to address potentially the tail end of your spend. So items that might be one-off purchasing, suppliers that you've not uncovered yet. This is a great opportunity for you to leverage possibly new sources of supply, but also get visibility into marketplace pricing. And again, if we click into one of these areas, you can see this is a supplier that we've found through spot buy. I'm able to see exact pricing, SKUs. If they had provided, we've got some availability and stock information that's being provided back. In this case, we're able to leverage content that's through a partnership through eBay to be able to pull in this content. Most importantly, too, we're able to pull in the accounting code information from your back-end system. So any master data with your chart of accounts, we're able to pull in all of the accounting details. You can also see approval flows within this, and approvals can also be easily managed within the tool also. So once our order is created and fully approved, it then kicks off to the supplier. So this is the ability to interface with all suppliers. As long as they have an email address, we can enable those suppliers to receive purchase orders. So it is an interactive email where all they have to do is click on that process order within their email itself. There's some secure login information ensuring that the financial information that's being passed between you and your supplier is confidential and secure. They also have the ability to kind of track their inbound purchase orders and track volume through the tool. So once they're in, they have the ability to either create order confirmations, create ship notices. So if they're creating a confirmation, they can confirm quantities, they can provide back order status, they can reject certain amounts and quantities within the purchase order that they're not able to fulfill. The shipping information allows you to capture tracking details, courier providers, IDs. And then your invoicing rules, this is really where, you know, AP is going to get the most process efficiency out of this area. So you're able to quickly and easily identify certain key invoicing rules and guidelines. The benefit here, you know, in the example in the bottom with the quantity exceeds the quantity limit in the purchase order, these are issues that and errors that the supplier needs to address immediately before that invoice even hits AP's desk. So the goal is to really eliminate a number of those high-touch errors or high-touch invoice errors that come in. And Paul, I will pass it back to you.
Thank you, Erica. That was great. I look for everybody on the call. Hopefully that gave people a little bit of a sneak preview, I guess, into how the solution looks. As I said earlier on the call, we're going to take this theme of sort of out of the box, you know, best practice implementation, and create a series of related webinars over the next sort of 6 to 12 months. So we're going to run our next webinar will be a full hour just actually in the pre-configured solution and actually walking people through that. So just please keep an eye out for that. I'm not necessarily plugging the next one early in the process, but please keep an eye out for that because we just feel it needs a full hour for it to give you a sort of day in the life of a user, day in the life of an approver, day in the life of a buyer, you know, day in the life of a supplier and AP clerk. So I guess moving away from the solution, you know, when we looked at the challenge around how do we drive P2P in the mid-market faster, I guess at a lower cost and speed to value, what we quickly realized is there's two bits to it. One is actually having that best practice pre-configured solution, which we've talked about. The second half of it is really having a delivery model and a delivery methodology that can support that timeline. We've based the sort of approach and the solution really to gain, you know, we want to be able to provide certainty of outcome and value realization to our customers. We want to lower the risk by using a set of, you know, pre-tested accelerators, you know, proven standard integration, particularly if it's a SAP back-end install. We recognize that organizations have been through, you know, long, high-cost technology-related implementations. So we want to be able to offer a solution that lowers the overall implementation cost. At the same time, as that the trade-off is, you know, clients have to trust the fact that we've got something pre-built, pre-tested, and is based around best practice. Faster delivery was a theme we were hearing from all of our from a load of clients. Now, faster delivery on our side, but also faster delivery on the client side. How do we cut through some of the onerous regression testing and testing activities that can sometimes slow you down during that realization phase? How do we template the delivery so that it's, you know, day by day, week by week, it's templated? And then let's make sure we're going into the program, you know, the solution has got a robust design around it, which is 90% fit for purpose. And that means we can focus on the 10% rather than blueprinting and designing and building the 100% each and every time. And then when we start to think about, you know, Jason mentioned earlier Agile. What we've tried to look at is what we're talking about today is procure to pay. We very much have a vision to create an accelerated source to pay deployment out of the box, which has a series of sprints. And we're spending this hour very much talking about sprint one. That talks about a pre-configured P2P solution and a supplier enablement and catalog enablement process focused around, you know, what we would call sort of, you know, free of charge, light account enablement. But that's really, you know, that first deployment, that first sprint, if you like, that's the first component of it. Part of this is to really take people on a journey around procurement transformation and best practice, but do that in a controlled, phased way. What we look at is Sprint 2, and there'll be some future webinars that will talk about this. But then an evolution from the pre-configured P2P solution is to say, right, how do I now get contract management linked into my P2P application? How do I ensure that the contracts I'm putting in place are being operationalized through the guided buying functionality that you just saw? How do I get my invoices tracked against those contracts? How do I drive a degree of contract compliance, particularly for my high value, let's say, sort of high risk contract? So our second sprint will be very much looking at contract management out of the box, focusing initially around the repository and the approvals. Likewise, sourcing. So we talked about Sprint 1 having 3 bids in the buy. Very much sort of tactical, rapid, rapid sourcing. However, with some of our higher value categories, higher value spend, clients will want to run, e-auctions, e-RFXs against some standard templates. They may want to put some more control in place around when a supplier is awarded a contract and the approval process for that. So again, the second part of Sprint 2 is very much around out of the box source to contract, taking you up to award. And again, this can very much be done rapidly deployed, and then you drive adoption on a supplier, contract, or category by category basis. And then I talked a little bit about earlier around some of the extended P2P features that don't necessarily come in Sprint 1, but they may well be as you mature the pre-configured P2P solution and you've got a level of adoption. You can then look at some of, maybe 1 or 2 of some of the more extended and complex functionalities of P2P that you may not have wanted on day 1, but you may decide to form part of Sprint 2. And then as you come to the end of Sprint 2, you're looking at a scenario where you've got a lot of spend on contracts. You've got good amount of spend going through e-sourcing and good amount of spend under management. You've got good spend compliance and process efficiency in P2P. Your maturity of your procurement function will evolve and grow as you go through those 2 sprints, making you ready then for some of the things that you then find as part of Sprint 3. So, analytics. You start to take the transactional data, the contractual data, the sourcing data. You turn that data into insight to make better sourcing decisions in the future, better procurement decisions going forward. Suppliers will be light account enabled on the platform, using the free of charge interactive service, but then may look at full supplier enablement for some of the high volume, more strategic suppliers where you can drive further operational efficiency within the supply base. Likewise, on contract management, you can move from a repository and approval to having electronic signatures, working more closely with your legal team for your complex contractual agreements and having a clause library. And then as you move away from contract management, as part of your sourcing and contract management process, you want to look at supplier pre-qualification and supplier performance. Now, invariably, Sprint 2 and Sprint 3 can be really flexible. There's probably a Sprint 4 which looks at risk management, looks at collaboration in your supply chain further down the tiers. So this is all highly configurable, intuitive, and you can sort of morph that into your own technology roadmap. Then we get into the actual methodology, and again, we've had to build a project methodology that's sort of business benefit driven, but that focus on this Sprint 1. So that the project preparation phase is probably the most critical phase of the program. If we're trying to do something in a 12-week period, there is absolutely an exit criteria for that preparation phase. Master data has got to be ready. The data transports have got to be plugged in and working. The resourcing's got to be mobilized, particularly during that business validation phase. And we've got to have people in the client project team that have got to, that have been trained on the solution early in the program. If you don't have some of those things in place, then you're only going to start a program of work that sort of has a degree of risk associated with it already. And then we go away from business, we go away from a classic blueprint and build phase into business validation. We're coming to you with a pre-configured solution, pre-configured integration scenario, albeit we have to validate the data and the integration. We can focus on the data conversion and the migration from upfront, and a pre-configured set of buying channels, and that we can map to your spend. Now, this would typically take anything from 4 to 12 weeks in typical projects, and we're proposing we would hothouse this in literally a week, because we're changing the mindset. We're not asking you what you want anymore. We're asking you, why won't this work? It's really about adopt, not adapt, I guess, as you go through that validation phase. And then we get into the area of the project that we all know, look, the configuration and the testing, where there's a degree of functional solution configuration. Yes, it's out of the box, but as I said earlier, that 10%, there may be some things that we can quickly sort of configure on the fly, if you like, during that realization phase. Clearly, the building of the interfaces is critical, and often becomes the critical path on these projects. Getting the supplier enablement email data, getting the supplier data and the files uploaded so that we can get a lot of those suppliers using the network straight away. And obviously, look, testing the full solution around unit test, integration, and UAT. These are all standard steps in any implementation methodology, but doing this in a more sort of agile, iterative way, and then preparing the training and the change content. I guess for P2P, the real challenge for guided buying is we want to make it easy to use and intuitive for end users. However, there is still a degree of procurement and finance people in both mid-market and large enterprise clients that will need to have a full understanding of the solution and how they make it work for them. And then we get into the final preparation, end user training, transition to support and go live. And then at the back end of that, we have a sort of value realization phase where we stabilize the solution, continually drive adoption, more spend through preferred buying channels, and deliver the benefits. So look, that's very much, and you'll see a project plan in a minute, but the sort of project methodology that underpins this is very much in here. Now, supporting that, what we have is a set of pre-configured accelerators. So I'm just going to pick out a few because I'm conscious of time, but best practice process flows. We bring them to the project on day -2 of the project. If we're only tweaking the 10% of the process, then we're only updating those very little. So we bring those as out of the box best practice process flows. Likewise, Erica showed you in sort of in real time the look and feel of certain categories and the buying channels. Again, for all of those categories, we've got pre-configured content and pre-configured recommendations around which buying channel is right for which category. And obviously, look, the pre-configured solution, I can't stress the importance of that, because we get to work with that solution from day one of the project. And then you look at the plan on a page. We talk about sprint 1 earlier, but this lays out to you the sort of the sort of high level project plan. I talked about this weeks -2. Preparation phase, master data readiness, transport setup, implementation readiness, spend analysis. You've then got this 1 week solution validation, where we validate the integration, we validate the data, we rapidly build a buying channel and a supplier enablement plan, and then we get into that sort of 3 weeks of build, particularly around the building of the interfaces, which is probably the bulk of the activity during that time. Make sure the solution is robustly tested, back-end ERP, master data, the OK to pay, remittance, and interfaces, but more importantly, the user acceptance testing, which is that first level of knowledge transfer and training to the wider organization. And then we look at training, pre-go live support, deployment readiness and training during that sort of, that deployment phase, followed by post-go live support in that respect. As we come out of that methodology, then we sort of finish with, okay, look, what's it gonna look like in week 13? I've had a number of customers where we've road tested this solution. What's it gonna look like at the end of sprint 1? So very much where some of the ROI components here is around the spend compliance in a procurement organization that has low levels of spend under management. Should be aiming for sort of savings in the region of 10%. We've seen process costs reduce significantly, particularly in accounts payable, but also in procurement and procurement shared service centers. And the key to this is this is weeks rather than months. A key bit of feedback we had from CFOs, particularly in the mid-market, was they have such short-term planning and investment cycles. They have to see payback in less than a year, otherwise they can't justify the investment to typically the owners and the board and shareholders. So that was really important for us when pulling together a solution. Now, if we get speed, it means we got you up and running quickly with a core solution. It might not be the end solution, but up and running quickly with a core best practice solution, supporting your organization's process and integration needs. So massively simplified the onboarding and support process for the suppliers. To register on a light account in the SAP Ariba network is a couple of clicks. To receive a PO and flip it into an invoice, it's a couple of clicks. It's very easy to use. And then on a total cost of ownership and looking at the fact that this is a cloud solution, we sort of minimize some of those technology deployment and maintenance costs. And then as we've got speed, we're in a place where we can drive also adoption. Guided buying means that users can easily find what they need. We did a piece of research once where I think the average end user in a requisition in front end gives up after about 20 seconds. So you've got to get them to find what they need quickly. Pricing in terms not only accurate, but they're backed off against the contract, and that will drive adoption of preferred suppliers. Stakeholders have a good user experience. They can view their approval. They can approve the status of their order. It's got mobile connectivity. Workflows are no longer wet signatures. They're automated. Budgets are better managed, so finance are happy. And you've got simple, intuitive reporting. You can once you've set the reporting up, you can automatically have it sent to you in a period of time. And then if you've got adoption, our view is you then have efficiency. Adoption drives efficiency and compliance. Users can easily view, they get alerts, reminders, the workflows can be modified in real time as you adapt those. And then as a result of that, we've got proven financial savings, measurable efficiency gains, and as we talked earlier about rapid feedback. What we're aiming for here, one of the sort of value realization components, what we talked at the beginning, what does the CFO want procurement to do? They want it to reduce costs. So if you can deliver supplier savings, spend savings of 10% and have spend compliance or spend the contract within a 3-month period and reduce process costs, that's going to reduce external and internal costs. They want process efficiency. So there's no doubt that there's a significant benefit around procurement and finance cycle times. But more importantly, light-enabled suppliers will drive electronic invoicing and dealing with the supply base in an electronic way, have benefits for both the supplier and the finance. And then they want to deliver fast results. So we want to deliver benefits in 12 months, full payback in 6 to 9. You package all that together, better order spend, better managed, particularly around mid-market, where you often see that spend cost base has been growing over a period of time, more process coverage, more strategic impact for the procurement and the finance functions. Okay, look, I'm gonna I'm going to pause there and stop talking. I'm going to hand over to Naveed, one of our colleagues. And look, just want to remind you guys again, have we got any, do we have any questions from anybody? Naveed, are there any questions that we've had as we've been going along?
Yes, there are. There's a couple I've collated here around, somebody's asking about the roadmap of innovation. Does this solution that Paul, you and Eric have shown today, does it have its own path in terms of SAP's roadmap or innovation? I don't know if Paul or Jason wants to cover that.
Yeah, Jason, can you cover that?
Hey, sorry guys, I was on mute. And it's just in terms of what do we see in addition on the roadmap? Is that the core question?
Yeah, the questions are, does SAP have a separate roadmap for this solution, or does it fit the path of the existing innovations and roadmap in place for Ariba?
Right, great question. Yeah, so we've developed an entire team and focus and infrastructure on this space. It does leverage the same multi-tenant environment as the rest of our solutions at this point, so it will follow the general and broader roadmap of the SAP Ariba solutions themselves, but there is an entire team globally that's simply and only focused on this particular area with a seat at the products innovations table.
Great. Okay, I have another one here that's come in. There was mention of additional modules and functions. Somebody's asking, it's not clear what's included with the offering, the licensed offering, as opposed to some of the additional things. Particularly, somebody's asked about contracts. Do they get contracts, contract management as part of the solution?
Yeah, and Naveed, I guess to take that from I guess a software resale perspective, then yeah, I mean, look, we focused today. If I take people back, we focused today on Sprint 1. That is the sort of Ariba P2P solution that we've sort of templated specifically for the mid-market. As with all of these requirements from clients, if as part of that sort of initial scoping with a customer that actually they wanted to bring, what we talked about, contract management into that Sprint 1, which is absolutely eminently doable and something we've done with a number of clients, then yeah, absolutely that could be included. But obviously that would also be, that would have to be then included in the appropriate software bill of materials to cover that. So I think the solution obviously is geared around P2P, but we could absolutely move that into move contract management if needed to be into that Sprint 1, and we just have to reflect that as part of the software and implementation bill of materials, I guess.
Okay. Yep. Thanks. Someone's asking about what sort of resources are required from the customer in terms of whether it's business or IT, the level of involvement required. You mentioned ease of use and simplicity of the solution. So is anyone able to give a bit more information around the level of involvement?
No, that's a great question, and one an important prerequisite for that sort of preparation phase, the sort of 2 weeks minus. I'd say given, I guess the good news is we're not sort of talking to people about a 6-month intensive resource commitment. However, what I would say is, look, the fact that we are going to be driving this over a 12-week period, I think absolutely there has to probably be at the very least up to the end of UAT, a sort of a dedicated resource from within the IT organisation and the support organisation that manages the back-end DRP for sure. I would expect certainly a sort of procurement and finance sort of process lead, not necessarily full-time for the 12 weeks, but certainly during the validation, the 1-week validation and the build phase, probably full-time up to that point, in order to make sure we've got people the knowledge is transferred. Whoever's going to sort of administer and own the system going forward as business as usual is involved in that project from the outset. And then likewise, I think where we've got people out in the business, end users, then I think there's a decision to take around, my view is you would engage them in business readiness and change management activities throughout the course of 12 weeks. I don't think you need dedicated resource from the business. But, after that validation phase, you'd want to do, process walkthroughs, buying channel walkthroughs, show them the look and feel of the system, how easy it is to use. Clearly, there's a end user involvement in UAT and obviously training as we go from a smaller group to a larger group, depending on the size and complexity of the organisation. That could be anything small, anything large. And then as you get into deployment, it becomes very much, I guess, business as usual, depending on the deployment roadmap.
Okay, and there's one more coming around training. So you mentioned about training. What kind of techniques, accelerators do you have around training? Whether they're end users or key users who are operational on the system. Yeah,
and look, I think there's some of our accelerators. So when I think about end users, requisitioners, approvers, we very much out of the box best practice e-learning. Probably a degree of trainer or classroom based users for some of those sort of super users that you'd want to be part of your change network to drive adoption and deployment post go live. And then likewise, as we get into training for accounts payable, administrator training, training for procurement, your operational team, then again, look, we would bring a degree of off-the-shelf, out-of-the-box training materials and work through what the right training method is. That could be a mix of classroom training supported by quick reference guides, user guides. If clients have got a learning management system, you can incorporate some of the information as part of that. But yeah, absolutely. I think even more so in the condensed timeline, training becomes critically important.
Right. I think that wraps up the questions. So thank you for those who submitted the questions. If you do have any more, I think we've got a couple of minutes left, but do send them in to us via the channels that we're going to just talk about now on the next steps.
Yeah, no, thank you, Naveed. Look, it's been great having everybody on for our first webinar in this space. Look, as I say, look out for future webinars. I'm going to create a theme around this. We will host the next webinar with a full sort of hour focused on the actual pre-configured solution itself. We're more than happy to talk to clients, and provide a sort of customized demo of the solution. We very much recognize, particularly in the big market, in the mid-market, the business case and the investment case are critically important. We've got a ton of experience around how we help clients build that case for change, and more importantly, how we bake that case for change into the value realization associated with the project. And then look, we can talk about different implementation approaches, lessons learned. More than happy to have a one-on-one conversation with any of the customers on the webinar today. And then, yeah, I say, look out for the future out-of-the-box webinars. We'll hopefully try and do one of these on a related theme on a monthly basis. And look, it's been great having everybody on. And just let us, any feedback. We will send out the presentation pack to everybody that's attended. So the guys in the team will do that. And I think when you receive that, we'd really like to hear people's feedback as well. So any suggestions around, things that you would have liked to have heard more on, even themes around the next webinar, things you want to go into a little bit more detail on, just please send that to the team that send it out to you. And great, look, thank you. I think we're on the hour, so thank you to everyone, and great having everybody online with us today. And thanks to Jason and Naveed and Erica as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.